this year on the National Black History Month theme and focus, which is Black Health and Wellness. I want to just make a quick announcement. In the foyer are individuals from Monroe County Department of Mental Health, Community Outreach Specialists. If you are here, please stop by before you leave to see them. And if you're joining us via social media and are not physically here, we invite you to log on to monroecounty.gov, click on the mental health section, and you will get information and resources while you're at home and how to reach individuals if you need to do so. I know we're a little delayed, so how this is going to work this afternoon is in a few seconds we're going to welcome Dr. Clark here to the podium. And what we'd like you to do is that we're going to listen to her presentation, and if you have questions, there are index cards here if you're physically here in the church for you to be able to write down your questions, just that way you remember them as we're going through. And if you're comfortable, you'll come to that mic over here to my right when it's the Q&A time and share your question. If you're not, just raise your hands. We'll collect the index cards and we will ask the question on your behalf if you would like to remain anonymous or a bit shy about that. She's also, Dr. Clark has also brought along with her the actual report, The Color of Health, The Devastating Toll of Racism on Black Lives. There's a few copies. Grab it. If not, I'm sure she'll share where you can find it online. So without taking any more time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Linda Clark, who's the Chief Medical Officer for Common Ground Health, to the podium. And let's give her a round of applause and thank her for her wisdom and knowledge.
Instructions. Okay, good morning or good afternoon. I keep saying morning because apparently Saturday is a long morning. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. And, basically the theme of what I'm going to talk about is racism and how it impacts the health of Black people in our region. So the report, The Color of Health, is a product of Common Ground Health. And it's a conglomeration of some primary research we did, in addition to some vital information that's available for our Finger Lakes region. But as I said, the bottom line is that racism is the underlying cause of a lot of the health disparities that we see in our region. I like to start with, and it's going to sound different, just a little different than the way you've heard it. Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhuman because it often results in physical death. And I think a lot of times what he said was inhuman, and to me that is much more stark and cruel than inhumane. It gives permission to treat people as though they're not people. And really that's the history of slavery and post-slavery life for Black Americans. So throughout the report, I'll be talking about, throughout our talk, I'll be talking about some key points of the report. And I've already given the main one, which is racism is the primary underlying driver of the deep and persistent health inequities experienced by Black people, and I'll give some examples of that. And I want to talk about COVID, because this has been a perfect example of showing how inequalities have existed and exist for Black people in our region. So I come from Common Ground Health, so there has to be some graphs, because we like graphs. We like case rates, hospitalization rates, and death rates for COVID. White people are in dark blue, Black people are in gray in this graph, and green are Hispanic people or Latino people in the Finger Lakes region. And basically, what it shows is that Latino and Black people were contracting COVID at a much higher rate than white people. My screen went off. And the hospitalization rate was much, much higher. I'm gonna have to stop moving that. For Black people and Latino people compared to white people. And then the death rate was about twice as much for Black and Latinos as compared as even dealing with inequities. So why was there a difference? You know, people are like, what's wrong with Black people and Latino people? There's nothing wrong with Black people and Latino people. Let me be clear. Hear that and are taught that there are no biological differences. You probably have heard, well, race, when the world work from home. You know, when I had to do my clinical responsibilities, I could not do that from home. So, you know, if you're a nurse's aide, you're not going to make your salary at home. You have to go where the patient is. Dependence on public transport in more crowded circumstances. The need to shop for yourself. You can't just click on the Wegmans app and you get to, you know, Instacart and have somebody load your car and go home. And then the densely populated neighborhoods. You know, if one of you gets COVID and needs to be isolated and you're in a 2-bedroom apartment and there's 6 people living there, it starts to get very difficult to control the infection within that household. So those are some of those structural things that I will talk about a little bit more. And then we saw a high risk of COVID complications driving hospitalizations and ultimately death. Black and Latino people were more likely to have chronic conditions, not because they're biologically inferior, but because of structural barriers. If you could not get tests to take to people who needed tests. You know, we're hearing about wealthy people in Florida who were able to buy the test, and we couldn't get them to people right here. And so they were less likely to be able to early detect the fact that they had COVID and help stop. We went out in the streets and we were testing. We weren't testing because we could not get the nasal swabs, but we were taking temperatures and blood pressures and pulse oximeters, which measures the oxygen level, because we realized that people would call and say, you know, I've got this, that, and the other, and it was time consuming. If you had to go to